Hi, I'm Kris Hawkins, the parent educator at Teen Health Connection. And if you haven't heard of Teen Health Connection, we are a comprehensive adolescent medicine and behavioral health practice affiliated with Atrium Health here in Charlotte. And there's no other practice like us. Our parenting program is a part of the nonprofit side, and we rely on grant funding, which makes it possible for us to provide parent support and training at no charge. I've included a Google registration link in the chat box. If you would be so kind as to copy and paste that link in your browser and complete the brief registration form, I would be most appreciative. It will seriously take less than a minute to complete. It's not a requirement, but just by registering and viewing, you're helping Teen Health Connection by being a representative of the impact we're making in the community. So thank you in advance. If you do take that minute to do service for Teen Health Connection, the research and evaluation team will send you a brief survey afterwards, and I don't see those, so please be honest. I've also included my email address and phone number. Please feel free to contact me as questions or parenting issues arise. I'm really thrilled to be partnering with Charlotte Mecklenburg Library. And today our topic is managing stress, building resilience, and coping with change in healthy ways. We deal with stress and change every day, so this topic will always be relevant. And let's dive in. Stress is a response to an external cause like running late, getting caught in traffic, an upcoming test. It typically subsides when the situation is resolved. Anxiety is a person's reaction to stress, and its origin is internal. The American Heritage Dictionary defines anxiety as a state of uneasiness and apprehension about future uncertainties. Dan Harris, who wrote the book 10% Happier, and he developed the app 10%, speaks with a lot of experts on the subject of anxiety. And they say anxiety really boils down to overestimating a potential threat or underestimating your ability to cope with that threat. Chronic stress can cause anxiety, and both share many of the same emotional and physical symptoms. The main difference, where stress subsides once the situation is resolved, anxiety persists. It's important to be able to identify signs of stress and anxiety within yourself. In order to change, we have to be aware. So take a look at this list and see if any of these look familiar. According to the American Psychological Association, chronic stress is linked to 6 leading causes of death, including heart disease, cancer, lung ailments, cirrhosis of the liver, and suicide. The bottom line, if you're experiencing any one of these symptoms persistently with no relief, your body is trying to tell you something. Think about how you personally experience stress and what triggers your symptoms, so you can make an action plan to address and effectively manage those symptoms. The phrase life is stressful is all too common. We're living stressed, and a lot of the time we aren't even aware of it. Think about it. Relationships, work, school, planning for your future can all be stressful. We're experiencing stress of some kind on a daily basis, and the result is health problems. So here are 5 things you should know about stress. 1, stress affects everyone. No one is immune to stress. It's a normal reaction the body has when changes occur. 2, not all stress is bad. The experience of stress within our bodies is the same, whether good or bad. What distinguishes one type from the other is how you feel about the experience. Essentially, stress can be anything that unbalances your equilibrium. So even positive life changes can bring about stress. 3, long-term stress can harm your health. The human body is designed to experience stress and react to it, but not chronic stress. Persistent chronic stress is what causes health problems. 4, there are ways to manage stress. Over 30 hormones are released as a part of the body's response to stress. The physiological changes these hormones trigger include racing heart, difficulty breathing, elevated blood pressure, all things that tax the body. We're so accustomed to living in this state that sometimes we aren't even aware of the changes. The good news, there are things we can do to trigger the relaxation response within our bodies, which can help lower blood pressure, heart rate, breathing rate, and stress hormones. 5, if you feel overwhelmed by stress, ask for help from a health professional. The stigma related to mental health issues is so often a barrier to people seeking the help they need, which definitely needs to change. It takes all of us battling against these stigmas and joining together from a place of compassion to educate and spread awareness. There is no shame in seeking help. In fact, the opposite is true. It takes real strength. So stress affects all areas of our life, our body, mood, and behavior. But what does this stress look like in our brain? To make a long story short, stress blocks the prefrontal cortex, which is where we do all of our higher level thinking, making thoughtful decisions and good choices. Instead of responding in a thoughtful, calm way, we do the exact opposite. We lose control and we react from our emotions. If you're living with teenagers, if you interact with them regularly, or if you're a teenager, it's important to know that the average teenager's brain looks slightly different from an adult, and it's rapidly changing and maturing until the mid-20s. In fact, some experts would say for men or boys that their brain is under construction until 30, close to 30. The 3 most important areas of the brain to consider when attempting to understand your tween or teen's behavior are these 3 on the screen. The prefrontal cortex, the ventral striatum, and the amygdala. And here's why. The prefrontal cortex, which is what we mentioned on the previous screen, it's the area of the brain involved in decision-making, planning, and self-control. And it's the last part of the brain to mature. This means in the heat of the moment or when under pressure, our teens process information with their amygdala, their emotional brain, instead of their prefrontal cortex. Teens can access that thinking part of their brain. They just may need strong emotional support and positive influence to get there. The amygdala seen here in red is the emotional brain. It's the fight, flight, freeze brain. So when tweens are making decisions, a safe assumption would be their emotions rule. They aren't thoughtfully considering their feeling. The ventral striatum is the reward center of the brain, and teens are hardwired to seek rewards. The ventral striatum is the most active ever during the teen years. Rewards are more important to teens than they are to children or to adults. And then finally, teen brains are designed for risk-taking. So teens are more willing to take risks in order to experience rewards. Of course, during adolescence, peer relationships become very important, and peer influence increases the likelihood of risky behavior. The reward is greater when peers are present. I love this cartoon, and I just think it makes me chuckle. And we really can think of our teenagers, you know, in thinking this way, the teenage mouse, I can totally get away with this. So that just helps us to put our teenagers' behavior into perspective. So resilience is an ability to recover from or adjust easily to misfortune or change. The more resilient you are, the better equipped you are to cope with stress effectively. And while some people come by resilience naturally, research has shown these behaviors can also be learned. Ohio State University has developed this brief resilience scale. I don't introduce this as a diagnostic tool, just a useful tool to increase awareness about where you stand on any given day with regards to your resilience. Just like a difficult workout weakens our muscles, difficult life situations can weaken our resilience. Thankfully, there are strategies we can utilize to strengthen our resilience muscle. So if you want to take a quick minute to take a look at the screen and score your these 6 questions, then the scoring system is on the next screen. Remember, your score on this scale is just a reference point, but the more information you have about yourself, the better. And just by tuning into this training, you have really demonstrated resilience. And I think that's important to point out. It's baby steps, and this taking part in a training like this just shows your willingness to grow and learn, which is a sign of resilience. So there is the scoring system for the brief resilience scale, and you can take a minute to add yours up and see what score you got. But remember, on any given day, we can be weak. Our resilience can be weakened by experiences, and we just need to be aware of the ways that we can strengthen our resilience. Remember this: the journey of 1,000 miles begins with one step. I love that quote by Lao Tzu. It's great to have big goals, but it's important to break your big goals down into small ones and create an action plan or a list of steps you can check off every day that will make you feel encouraged. It's easy to feel discouraged when our goal seems out of reach. Instead of focusing on our failure to reach that big goal, let's celebrate every small step that moves us in its direction. If I have a goal of running a marathon, but I expect to do it tomorrow, I'm setting myself up for failure. But if I commit to walking 1 mile, maybe at least 3 times a week, then that goal is achievable and will give me a win fairly quickly. We need wins, not failures. This is relevant because a lot of these strategies I'm offering here may seem like a lot, but we don't have to take all of them or become meditation teachers tomorrow. Just maybe meditating 5 minutes a day, 5 days out of 7. That's a very achievable goal. So the takeaway here is break big goals down into smaller ones and celebrate the small victories. When we see our progress as a win, it's encouraging. And when you live encouraged, you are more resilient and you're more likely to manage stress well. Brene Brown is quoted as saying, "Connection is why we're here. It's what gives purpose and meaning to our lives." A unique Harvard grant study launched in 1938 followed 268 male Harvard undergraduates for 75 years through 2013. The study's most important finding: relationships are the only things that matter in life. In the end, it all comes back to relationships, connection, and love. Now, Brene Brown does a TED Talk. Her TED Talk on the power of vulnerability is the second most watched TED Talk of all time. She believes relationships are key. And Dr. Melanie Greenberg says satisfying relationships are associated with better health, greater happiness, and even longer life. So another way to manage stress is by maintaining healthy relationships. This sounds easy enough, but let's face it, humans are complicated beings. We have different viewpoints and opinions, and we disagree. That's a normal part of life. It's the way we approach disagreement that's critical. If both parties view disagreement as a problem, just to be understood or solved, not as a battle to win, the outcome will likely be positive. But all too often, people approach conflict using negative communication patterns that they've learned and subsequently reinforced over their lifetime. Negative communication patterns disconnect and damage relationships. The good news, we can kick the habit of communicating this way. It won't be easy, but it's possible to decrease our negative communication patterns and create healthy, satisfying relationships. The more positive and healthier your relationships are, the more resilient and optimistic you'll feel about your life. But negative communication patterns are deeply ingrained habits. How do we interrupt these bad habits and replace them with effective communication? We have to interrupt the habit loop. When you break a habit down, there are three parts: the trigger, the routine, and the reward. In this case, feeling angry or threatened is the trigger. The routine would be engaging in our preferred method of negative communication. And the reward, well, the reward in this situation might be winning an argument or manipulating someone else's behavior to get them to do what you want them to do. The takeaway here is you have no control over the trigger. If you want to interrupt a bad habit, the routine is what you need to focus on. In this case, we need to interrupt the negative communication pattern. We first have to recognize negative communication patterns before we can interrupt them. Researchers have identified 5 patterns of negative communication that are particularly damaging to relationships. Let's review them. Contempt is described as the use of sarcasm, mockery, insults, eye-rolling, scowls, or hostile humor to convey disgust and disrespect. Contempt is extremely dangerous and destructive to a relationship. Criticism expresses disapproval of a person or thing. Criticism at its worst is generalizing. It can be a character attack. General statements such as, "You're so lazy," "You always put yourself first," or "You never consider my feelings." Criticism differs from a simple complaint. A simple complaint is only about a specific situation or behavior, like, "I'm upset you didn't take out the trash like you said you would." The harmful criticism we're speaking of here involves attacking someone's character, and that is where that overgeneralizing comes in. Defensiveness, that's someone who's emotionally immature is often defensive. They're unable to accept blame and take responsibility. An example, "It's not my fault," or defensive, "I'm not defensive." Stonewalling includes behaviors such as disengagement, avoiding eye contact, and not acknowledging the other person. When someone is using these strategies, it's a good indication they're overwhelmed by the conflict, and they may believe choosing disengagement is a way to protect themselves. Unfortunately, when we disengage, constructive problem solving is unlikely to happen. And finally, emotional disengagement. Just like these others, it's harmful and damaging to relationships. Emotionally disengaged people typically don't argue or display high levels of negativity. Instead, they show very little concern for and aren't responsive to the other person's needs or wants. What's important to remember is your verbal outbursts can be regulated, and regulating our emotions is at the very heart of resilience. I just like this quote: never let your emotions overpower your intelligence. Emotional regulation is the ability to feel any emotion, to process it internally, and then respond thoughtfully and calmly. Emotional regulation in its most basic form allows us to bounce forward from failure and stay calm under pressure. Emotional regulation is resilience at its best. And now let's dive into the strategies that will support our emotional regulation. The way we do or don't deal with stress and the strategies we use to build resilience impacts all our relationships. That's why these suggestions here are so important. Number 1, practice radical acceptance. Number 2, cultivate mindfulness. 3, embrace stress. 4, live a balanced life. And 5, practice gratitude. Remember, it feels better to be in a state of balance rather than carried away by stress. We owe it to ourselves and those we are in relationship with every day to be intentional about managing stress and building resilience. So let's go over each of these. First, radical acceptance. Radical acceptance is not approval. Instead, it's completely and totally accepting with our mind, body, and spirit that we can't change the facts, even if we don't like them. It's acknowledging things are as they are, or a situation is as it is. It doesn't mean you stop working on things that you want to change, just that you accept the things you can't change. Remember, the only person we have absolute control over is ourselves. Everyone and everything else we can influence, but that's a very different thing. So while we can't control a situation, we can control our response to it. I love I've made this secular with the Serenity Wish, but you might have also heard of it as the Serenity Prayer. This is a mantra of mine. May I find serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. However you choose to think of it, making this your mantra can be a very powerful exercise of acceptance. I'm hoping I have a quick video here on how mindfulness empowers us. And
There's a story, usually attributed to the Native American tradition, which illuminates different ways of paying attention. An elder, talking to a child, says, "I have 2 wolves fighting in my heart. One wolf is fearful, vengeful, envious, resentful, and deceitful. The other wolf is compassionate, loving, generous, truthful, and peaceful." The child asks, "Which wolf will win the fight?" The elder responds, "The one I feed." That doesn't mean we try to deny or hurt or kill the angry wolf. If we did that, we'd end up in a long battle, all the while somehow making that wolf more powerful through our hostility and fear. Hating that wolf sucks the strength right out of us. Instead, we calmly pay attention to the angry wolf and let go of believing they have the answers. If we can do that, They end up lying down next to us, no longer an enemy. We help strengthen the kind and loving wolf, giving it nourishment and support so that we can follow it. That peaceful wolf can become our steady companion and show us the way through all kinds of different life experiences. Restful or chaotic, enjoyable or disappointing experiences may come and go, but we can have a guide with us through it all. This is what mindfulness can help you do. Mindfulness allows us to see our thoughts and feelings as they are beginning. It's very powerful to know what we're feeling as we're feeling it, know what we're thinking as we're thinking it. With mindfulness, we can choose what will strengthen and bring into action, and we can choose what we will gently let go of. We don't have to be at the mercy of old habits or old ways of thinking or old ways of being. We are empowered. It just takes practice.
MRI scans indicate after an 8-week course of mindfulness practice, the brain's fight or flight center, the amygdala that we spoke of earlier, appears to shrink. This primal region of the brain associated with fear and emotion is involved in the initiation of the body's response to stress. As the amygdala shrinks, the prefrontal cortex, associated with higher order brain functions such as awareness, decision-making, it becomes thicker. In other words, we experience fewer amygdala hijacks. Practicing mindfulness offers us options. Instead of being controlled by our emotions, we have the ability to make thoughtful choices. So let's dive into mindfulness just a little deeper. I want to stress that you can do anything mindfully. Don't get too hung up on technicalities. It's all about being in the moment. Mindfulness actually is the quality or state of being conscious or aware. So experiment and be creative. Remember that you can wash the dishes mindfully, make a mindful cup of coffee, connect with someone you love in a mindful hug. It's really all about just being in the moment. George Munford is another amazing meditation teacher that I love. He trained Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant, and Phil Jackson actually had him work with the Chicago Bulls on meditation. So I would just encourage you. This was a longer video, but I did want to just make you aware that this is something that you can search on YouTube. It is free, and it just really is amazing information. The only thing it will cost you is a little time and a little, just a little searching on YouTube, and there's lots of free meditation apps. Here are just a few of those. I've actually tried Insight Timer, Oprah and Deepak I love, and they often offer 21-day meditation experience for free. Several of these do, 10% Happier. If you are interested in a trial of 10% Happier, I can actually just email me or contact me, and I can share that with you. That's the app that I use, and I love that. So yeah, any of these are great. You can just check those out, and I'm sure there are even more. So take advantage of those. Remember this, finally, embrace stress. When you change your mind about stress, you can change your body's response to stress. I know it seems amazing. If all we needed to do to neutralize all these negative effects of stress is to change our perspective on stress, that's pretty amazing. So instead of looking at stress as the enemy, we make it our friend. Dr. Kelly McGonigal, she is a psychologist at Stanford University, and she has researched stress for years. Well, after spending close to a decade teaching about the health risks, she came across an 8-year-long study started in 1998 that looked at 30,000 American adults. Each person was asked the same questions: how much stress they had experienced in the last year, and if they believed stress was harmful. Then public death records were tracked over the next 8 years. Believe it or not, those who self-reported high levels of stress and believed it was harmful had a 43% increased chance of dying. And those who had the same amount of stress but believed stress wasn't harmful were less likely to die. The only difference researchers could find, and the implications are huge here, was the belief about whether stress was harmful or not. Turns out what we believe or don't believe is a whole lot more important than we ever could have imagined in a life-saving way here. Now, Dr. McGonigal completely changed her thoughts on stress. And she does a TED Talk on this topic that's really interesting. And Stanford University actually has a free resource called the Rethinking Stress Toolkit through their SPARQ department, SPARQ. And that stands for Social Psychological Answers to Real World Questions. They bridge research and practice to spark change for good in the world. Now, this is a great resource. They have all sorts of toolkits. They have one on race to spark change and undo racism, one on gender bias, which focuses on undoing stereotypes around gender and performance in STEM fields. But the Rethinking Stress Toolkit notes 3 steps to a stress is enhancing mindset. Number 1, acknowledge stress. You have to know you're stressed before you can use it to your advantage. 2, welcome stress. Trying to avoid stress really drains our energy. And 3, utilize stress. They use the metaphor of the oyster and the pearl here. From a single piece of sand, which is an irritant to the oyster, a beautiful pearl forms. If we can learn to acknowledge stress, welcome it in, like that little piece of sand, and then work with it, believing that out of that challenge, something good can come. The bottom line is changing our mindset about stress can improve our physical and mental health. Balance, finding the middle ground. The middle road is often the road to mental health. Find a balance in your activities: work, school, community service, family time, screen time, time with friends, and downtime. Avoid black and white or all or nothing thinking. This tends to increase stress and anxiety. You evaluate everything in terms of success or failure, and you demand perfection from yourself, which we all know isn't possible. Instead, practice self-compassion. Remember, there's a lot of room between perfect and failure. Along those same lines, keep things in perspective. Getting one bad grade typically doesn't destroy your future. Remember, failure is necessary for learning. If we can learn to applaud failures for opportunities. Avoid fear-based thinking, and when you recognize you're in fear, take action. Meditate, practice deep breathing, or exercise. Just use a strategy that works for you. And remember, it's who you are as a person, not what you produce, or accolades you receive, or how you compare to others that matters. Theodore Roosevelt said, "Comparison is the thief of joy." So celebrate you for the person you are. You yourself, as much as anybody in the entire universe, deserve your love and affection. That's a quote from Buddha. Not because of anything you've done or not done, just because you are. Finally, we're going to talk about practicing gratitude. It's not happiness that brings us gratitude. It's gratitude that brings us happiness. Neuroscience research around gratitude proves that our mental health significantly improves as we learn to consistently be grateful. Gratefulness causes our brains to release more positive neurotransmitters such as serotonin, dopamine, and oxytocin, and lessen the presence of the stress hormone cortisol. So embrace gratitude to change your attitude. Gratitude has lasting effects on the brain. Don't expect results overnight. The benefits will accrue gradually over time. Just make a daily commitment to intentionally practice being grateful. And here are several ways you can make gratitude part of your daily routine. www.happierhuman.com. They offer a 30 days of gratitude challenge, the 21-day transformation gratitude meditation, and that's on YouTube. There's tons of gratitude podcasts and gratitude apps. So there is definitely a way that fits into your world to make gratitude a part of your everyday. Remember, change is inevitable. Have you ever heard the quote, "What you resist persists"? Psychologist Carl Jung coined this phrase, but it's based on Newton's third law of motion. For every force, there is an equal and opposite force. It's physics. The more we try to force life, the more it pushes back. If you're resisting change, change pushes back with equal force. So it's all the more difficult. I like the example of standing in a swimming pool and seeing something at the other end of that pool that you want. The faster you try to go, the harder getting there becomes. We can apply that to anything. If we're not happy with our friend and we lash out at them in anger, they push back with equal force. Now, that force might not be returned with anger. It might be to refuse to take ownership of your emotions. And that is an equal force as well. It's a good force, but equally as strong. Spiritual teacher Eckhart Tolle says, embracing your struggle is the end of fear. Acceptance of the present moment is the end of fear and anxiety. Acceptance of things as they are opens us up to the chance that change can bring. Once again, it's all about changing our perspective. And finally, in summary, to manage stress, build resilience, and cope with change, consider the following things. Maintain healthy relationships by interrupting your habit loop, recognizing your negative communication patterns, and replacing them with positive ones. Practice radical acceptance. Cultivate mindfulness. Embrace stress. Live a balanced life, and practice gratitude. Now, I've gone through this training with all these tips, but I want to say that, for everyone, this is a challenge, and on some days more challenging than others. So we are all, just doing the best we can. No one is perfect at any of these. So if we just choose one and work on that, and try them all out, individually, but find something that works for you. Here is my contact information. So take a picture of that, or just copy the chat, and please feel free to reach out if you have any questions or comments later. Here is our Teen Health Connections contact information. And we are just an amazing under-accessed resource in Charlotte. So we serve tweens and teens from 11. And if you're established as a patient before 18, then we'll see you till you turn 25. So I look forward to hearing from you. Thanks so much. And have a great rest of your day.